This is Will Friedle, the voice of the future Dark Knight, Batman Beyond, and you're listening to the DCAU Review hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app. And remember a few things. First, Dana deserves better. And second, I am Batman.
In the year 2039, Gotham City has no heroes. Its people, no hope. Its youth, no future.
Evening, boys and girls. Who's up for some laughs?
Terry McGinnis was part of the problem.
You can't control your temper, and you'd better if you expect to get anywhere in life.
Yeah, I'll be a big success, just like you.
Until a moment of violence brought him to the door of a man named Bruce Wayne.
Let's put a smile on his face.
Leave him alone. Once known as the Batman.
Man, you're something. You okay?
Now, the Dark Knight will rise again to drive the shadow of evil from the streets of Gotham. Let's go! Supervillains, beware! There's a new Batman in town. Batman Beyond. You're pretty strong for some clown who thinks he's Batman. I am Batman. Justice returns to Gotham. Welcome to my world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode 192 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me, as he always is, my good friend and good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. It's Liam. Liam, we are still here in our month spent in the future, 50 years from now, whenever now is, or the year 2039, or whatever you want to say that Batman Beyond takes place. But we are here once again with the future Dark Knight and everything that comes along with that as we continue in a month of reviews from the future.
That's right. We are, in fact, in future reviews, as you said, Cal. And we have just a fascinating episode to talk about today for a lot of reasons. Most notably, if you are a fan of science fiction and really one giant amorphous all-encompassing science fiction brand in particular, that being Star Wars, of course. But we will be talking today about the Batman Beyond episode, Sentries, Last Cosmos.
That is right. And boy, if you wanted to know what would happen if you took a giant homage and to Star Wars and said, hey, let's make a 22-minute cartoon out of it, boy, are you in luck today, because there's as Liam mentioned, a lot to talk about when it comes to that. Also interested in hearing Liam's thoughts on the plot as a whole. It's a very interesting episode. Don't have a lot of memories of this episode. I was definitely more familiar with it than I was with last week's episode, Liam. Don't remember necessarily watching this one a whole bunch. So it was definitely, some of the plot points were a little bit new for me. And doing some digging on this one, there was some fun research about some of the characters and who people are based on, and certainly lots of conjecture about that. But we'll get into that in just a little bit here as we do review Sentries of the Last Cosmos today, which originally aired on the Warner Brothers Kids WB back on May 6th, 2000, meaning we are coming up on the 22-year anniversary of this here episode. Liam, before we get into talking about our four categories today, we have the yet sponsored Imdb official synopsis for this week's episode.
That is right, and this is for the episode Sentries of the Last Cosmos, which was written by Rich Fogel and John Shirley, directed by Dan Reba, with music by Christopher Carter and animation by Coco and Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. Ardent players of in-depth virtual reality role-playing game are recruited by the supposed game for his own purposes.
One Well, I'm not a fan of the words that were actually chosen to describe, and it sort of leads you to not. It doesn't really say much about what the actual episode is about, so I'd give that one like a D.
Also, it doesn't mention Batman. Batman's in this. It's a Batman show.
He isn't a whole lot. I will say that it's not a lot of Batman in this episode, but I guess we can get into the plot as we talk about this today. But if you ever wanted to know what it was like, what people thought the metaverse would be like in the year 2000,
I was gonna say,
yeah, this is very relevant to today's topic, virtual reality and living in alternate reality.
I was going to say, yeah, we open with a sort of a sci-fi romping adventure straight out of, as you said, the metaverse. I mean, Facebook founder and Hall of First Ballot world ruiner Mark Zuckerberg would just be he would be in love with something like this.
Killer move, Corey. How'd you peg it?
Gotta go with your instincts.
Good instincts. You just bagged the all-time high score.
Yes!
No fair. You must have logged a gazillion hours on that game.
Maybe more. But for the first time, I really felt it, you know? Like I actually was a sentry of the last cosmos. Hey, watch it!
Or what? You gonna bop me with a flaming sword? Get a life.
There's Terry, Max, and their friend Corey are seemingly under attack by some evildoers in a spaceship, and they're sort of flying around on these little it's kind of the little Mr. Miracle like disc, floating disc things, whatever you call those, but they're sort of flying through, and they're in these sort of costumes. We'll certainly talk a lot more about this stuff in visuals, but right when it seems like all is lost, Corey pulls off an incredible maneuver, and we of course get the reveal that yes, of course, this isn't real. This is another virtual reality game. Do you think this is based on that same thing the Spellbinder did that was making all the kids' brains have aneurysms or whatever?
I was gonna say, like, I guess back in the year 2000, they thought that arcades were going to be a big thing in the future. I mean, obviously the foresight of not having the foresight of a global pandemic that would shut down the entire world for multiple years certainly may have inhibited that from happening. But yeah, they really went all in on, man, computer games are not going to isolate people and make them not have their have less interactions with human beings. They're going to be more interactive, and you're going to hang out with your friends at the arcade. So yeah, it's similar, I guess, similar technology that we've seen in those Spellbinder episodes. And interesting also that the Gotham arcade seems to be the hip and happening spot for socialites of all ages and social clubs here, as we also see Nelson Nash make a brief appearance at the same arcade.
Yeah, so he and Corey, we sort of get a little bit more about this Terry's friend Corey, who becomes sort of one of the main characters of this episode, in that he's clearly a little bit put upon, doesn't really seem to have any interests besides this video game, Sentries of the Last Cosmos, and seems to kind of consume his life. The next day at school, he and Max are discussing something, and all he wants to talk about is the game, and Max is sort of bringing up, hey, you could at least, maybe play another video game or something, which is like, I love how low that bar is. It's not like she's not telling him to touch grass or exercise more. She's like, maybe play a different video game for a little bit. But while he and Max are discussing this, Corey gets an email by claiming to be the inventor of this video that he's obsessed with, and it invites him to the stately manner, if you will, of this creator of this massive, apparently very popular Sentries of the Last Cosmos game.
Look, if we tweak these codes, we can design our own Sentry scenarios.
Don't you ever think of anything else? I mean, there are other games.
Yeah, right.
Got mail?
Oh my God.
What?
It's from Simon Harper.
The guy who created the Sentries? No way.
Yeah, the great wise one himself. He's like a god, and he's inviting me to Sentrycroft.
To where?
His private estate. Nobody goes there.
So what's he want with you?
Yeah, he gets the invite and he's very excited about it. Max doesn't find this very weird at all. By the way, I don't know if we mentioned it, but back at the arcade, after setting the high score for the game, there is this like ominous guy that shows up with a camera that is dressed just like the characters inside the video game that is apparently spying on Corey, and he flies away shortly thereafter. And then of course we get this email from the creator inviting him to the headquarters, or the mansion where he lives. Very normal thing for a grown man to invite an underage child to his mansion. Where Corey's parents were in this, we don't know, but they apparently signed off on it because Corey shows up not only and he's actually not alone. There's two additional young men who are joining him. And as they enter the mansion of one Simon Harper, who is the creator, we learn of the Sentries of the Last Cosmos game. They are met by what appears to be a hologram of him. He is dressed in full robes, and he is what do they call him? The Wise One?
Yes, the Wise One is his sort of stand-in, but this is sort of the all-knowing sort of good guy, the Gandalf, I guess, of this sci-fi world, is this Wise One, which is apparently formed by the creator of the game.
Yeah, so the Wise One is there, and he's greeting them and explaining to them that he has recruited them based on their high scores and has been observing them and has recruited them to the actual Sentries of the Last Cosmos that is taking place, that the game is simply based on a reality that is happening out in the actual cosmos. And he's about to send this group of children on a mission, and we then see later on that evening as Batman is out on patrol. There is a break-in at the Hall of Records, and he is sent there by Bruce to investigate. And upon his investigation, wouldn't you know it, he comes upon three young men dressed in these Sentries of the Last Cosmos costumes who are really doing a lot of destruction in this place. They're tearing things up, and they do battle with Batman, and they pretty, for a bunch of teenagers with fire swords, they kind of hold their own against the Dark Knight here. They don't have too many problems. They kind of destroy what they have to, and it's the dialogue that they have as they're destroying things leads you to believe that either they're seeing something that isn't there, an alternate reality perhaps, or they've been convinced that whatever it is that they're destroying is central to the actual game itself. As they sort of have this brief interaction with Batman, this conflict, they are able to escape with little to no worse for wear, happily destroying, and Batman sort of is left stroking his chin afterwards. And then meeting up later on at the school, Terry is actually conversing with Max, who had been previously playing the game, and she finds it very interesting that the people happen to be dressed up like these Sentries of the Last Cosmos just after Corey got this email. So she suggests talking to Corey to see if he knows anything or if it happens to be a coincidence. And Corey is a little bit off-putting, I would say, at this point. He's not forthcoming with any information. They ask him about his experience at Simon's mansion, and he says it was a big joke, and drives off on his motorcycle, which I guess in Gotham, you don't have to be like 18 to have a motorcycle license, or maybe he is 18. I don't know. Maybe that solves our problem of an underage gentleman being invited to a grown man's mansion. But so from there, I think at this point, Terry and Max both suspect that something may be afoot based on his reaction and how excited he was before he left versus whatever happened and his reluctance to be open about exactly what was going on at the mansion. So that causes Batman to head back to the mansion himself to do a little bit of investigating of his own.
Yeah, so this is part of the part where this story starts to break down a little bit for me, is Batman goes and he's sort of attacked by these security drones. He fights them off, and then he sort of comes face to face with this alleged creator, Simon Harper, who, he questions him about, I had people dressed up like game attack me and attack the Hall of Records in Gotham. What's going on? And Simon Harper kind of just brushes him off and tells him, I have a lot of crazy fans and people dress up like my characters, and they take things too far. And I'm sorry, but there's nothing, I don't know anything about it, and there's nothing about it. And so Batman, I will give Terry some credit here, because he doesn't just leave and forget. He does forget when he gets attacked by the drones that he can turn invisible, but that's just an eternal point of frustration. But yeah, we have Terry leave. He actually leaves a little camera behind so that he can kind of eavesdrop on the conversation as Batman escapes or leaves and leaves behind a little recording device. We get the three Sentries returning Corey and his two friends, and Harper tells them, in fact, that that not only are they doing the right thing, but that the evil that they're fighting is actually the same evil from the video games, and that all of the things that they've been experiencing in the virtual world are in fact real, and and that they must go and put a stop to this evil one who is threatening their life. And
so you don't know anything about those Sentries at the Hall of Records?
I'm sorry. I wish I could be more help, but Sentries, to me.
What happened, Wise One?
The Dark Region's servants have been here.
We'll find them.
No. I've a more important mission for you. The Dark Regent himself is here on Earth. He's taken on a human form, disguised as a man named Eldon Michaels.
Eldon Michaels? What are you saying?
Sentries of the Last Cosmos is no mere game. It simulates a real war, one being fought in the deepest reaches of space. For centuries, we wise ones have used it to recruit trainees like yourselves. Now, you must confront the Dark Region to save our universe.
As Harper lets them know that the Dark Regent, as he calls the I guess the supreme evil character from this video game, is real and is on Earth and is disguised as a man named Eldon Michaels. And of course, Terry is able to overhear that with the camera, and so he and Bruce do a little bit of sleuthing, find an address for Mr. Michaels, and as Batman arrives there, he sort of is briefly attacked by Michaels, and who pulls a gun on him, and is after that he sort of questions Michaels about why he would attack and why Harper would be after him, and he explains that he in fact is the actual true writer and creator of this giant, very profitable sci-fi world, and that Harper is simply trying to eliminate proof of the fact that he had something to do with it, for fear of having to do a fashion profit sharing if that info was to get out. And so the Sentries arrive to I guess finish their mission and attack what they believe to be the Dark Regent, but in reality is actually just a sort of jilted writer of the game.
Yeah, and that leads us to sort of the culmination as the Sentries arrive after Batman learns the truth. They do finish their attacking on this Eldon Michaels character. They then very quickly whisk him away to face Simon Harper in person. Batman is left there, and interestingly, it first appears that the evidence that Mr. Michaels had in his possession was burnt up, but then later on Batman picks it up unharmed. We'll talk about that in visuals. But as Batman flies and meets them back at this Simon Harper's mansion, we have our final battle here as Eldon Michaels is brought before him, and the Sentries, these children, are instructed to murder Eldon in front of Simon right then and there. They question, based on the oath taken by these Sentries and whether or not that it would be right for them to do so. Upon their questioning, we of course get the reveal that Simon is able to shoot lightning out of his hands and begins doing his best Emperor Palpatine impersonation, attempting to kill Mr. Michaels himself. Batman thankfully arrives and is able to spare all of the spare Eldon, and eventually is able to overcome Simon, revealing that his powers are stemming from, in fact, a suit that he's wearing that was creating this sort of illusion that he had these powers. So his arrogance and his faith in himself was ultimately his undoing. Wouldn't you know? So just at the end, after Simon is overtaken by Batman, he requests that the Sentries come to his aid, and they instead hold their light swords or their fire swords to his throat instead, recognizing that he is the true evil. So we get a little bit of Terry and Bruce in the Batcave. Batman being Bruce, sort of joking about how these poor kids don't have anything else to do with their time now that their hero and the game is sort of offline. But then we cut to a final scene of Eldon Michaels getting an apology in person from the three kids, Corey included, and then beginning to pick his brain about the actual evidence that he, in fact, was the original writer of this video game, and get all the answers that he can perhaps provide to them, and being the creator. So
what do you want? You left this at Sentrycroft, Mr. Michaels.
It's too important to trust anyone but you.
Thanks. Wait! What did the wise ones mean when they said seek the center?
And why did they send Aaron to Paraphora?
And the golden feather. What's with that?
Hey, it's just a game. But you know.
You're the man.
Yeah, the real wise one.
Well, if you really want to know, it all started a long, long time ago in a cosmos far from Earth.
So he wraps it up with a nice little bow and it all happened a long time ago in a cosmos far from here. So if it wasn't on the nose enough for you as a Star Wars homage, with everything else, we wrap up with that very poignant ending. So Liam, that will bring us, I think, to beginning to discuss our plot. Since I went first last week, I will just ask you, how did you feel about the episode?
So I think there's a lot of funny moments in it. I think the comedy really lands in this episode, and it's a lighter episode because of the subject matter. It kind of takes, I guess, a little bit of a darker turn once you get into people stealing credit, and when he tries to kill his former business partner and everything. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, it's a funny, fun episode, and the nerds sort of trying to out nerd each other when they first go to the manor, and then the some of the dialogue that Eldon Michaels has with Batman, and then with Harper later in the episode, I think is really, really funny. So there's definitely stuff in here I like. I will just say, as a story, it was a little difficult for me when we established that these three teenagers one are capable enough to commit high level corporate espionage and sabotage. 2, that they willingly did it, and then 3, later in the episode, after they've already committed the sabotage of the hull of records or whatever, because I guess the cloud is another thing that didn't exist in the year. So destroying the hard copies of these files is going to delete all credit for Michaels having created the game. So the thing that sticks with me really is they, in that scene, they have not yet been told or convinced by the bad guy that all of this is real and whatever, and they're fighting in a real intergalactic war. At that point, they just think they're just doing some light, like they're committing crimes willingly, and they haven't even really gotten to the point that they've been duped into thinking this is like real and there's some evil magical force that they're trying to keep at bay. Right. Then they are convinced of that, and then we get to the finale, and because Batman is able to produce a script that has written by Eldon Michaels on the front of it, that is enough to snap them out of it.
Right.
And maybe it's just because we've seen a lot of like real life cults and conspiracy theories pop up, but some words on a piece of paper, whether they are real, whatever, or even if it's, the most blatant, obvious proof of something you can imagine. If you're able to convince these people to willingly go along with the theory that they're literally pawns in an intergalactic war based on a video game, the idea that you could snap them out of it by showing them a script with someone else's name on the front of it, I just think it starts to break down. Maybe I'm coming at it a little too hard, or for an episode that's kind of as silly as this, but that's kind of where my head's at.
No, I don't think you're too far off from where I left things. So I came up with a series of questions. One, why did they destroy things in real life? I thought that maybe it was going to be revealed that the masks that they were wearing sort of did the Spellbinder thing where they thought that they were in a video game, and that, the Batman was actually not Batman. Like, they're in Gotham City. They know that Batman isn't directly related to the dark side of the force, or whatever the standard, standard for that here is. So I was confused by. I was like, okay, so they're doing this corporate espionage. Speaking of things, by the way, that I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg would be a fan of, taking credit for somebody else's work in corporate espionage. Please don't kill us, Mark Zuckerberg. But anyway, so you have that where they're destroying things in real life. Also, did the kids not have to face charges of any kind for doing this corporate espionage? They willingly did it. Yes, at the behest of the guy that ran the video game, but that doesn't mean that they just don't face any consequences. And they're revealed at the end to show up, by the way, at Eldon Michaels, who, by the way, Batman had a hard time tracking him down because there was no record of where he lived online. And then all of a sudden the kids are able to, he either went back to the same place that was destroyed in the fire, or it was just now super easy to find because, everything's okay and Simon Harper's behind bars, you would think. So I don't know. There's a lot of holes in this that don't make a whole lot of sense. And as you mentioned, I think the things that you brought up are very important, very poignant as well. For all those reasons, I did not like this week's episode, to be honest. I think it's very cute that they decided to do an episode that was sort of somewhat an homage to a lot of science fiction. There's a lot of things here that are nice little cute nods and winks, but I really, in the grand scheme of things, would rather have had a episode of Batman Beyond that didn't revolve around what if there were a whole bunch of fanboy obsessed Star Wars knockoffs that were somehow recruited to destroy records because somebody was trying to take sole credit for a video game creation. That just seems like an episode. Like, we've gotten so far from like the original grounded stories from Batman the Animated Series now. Like this is so far gone from that. Like I could have done without this.
It is wild to look at, like, if you go, we just passed the anniversary of, I believe, of Rebirth, parts 1 and 2 airing for the first time, and it's like that's that future, that world that is set up in that first episode. It's this like grimy, like Blade Runner future where like there's a bunch of bright neon that's sort of built on the decaying bones of an old broken city, and the poor live below and then take like a subway elevator up to to go to school or go to work or whatever. And it's like it's just this real gritty, like, again, like, probably ironically he gets name checked in here, a Philip K. Dick dystopian sci-fi setup, and yet by this point, yes, we're doing it's virtual reality and 3 kids in sci-fi samurai suits with fire swords floating around, and like I said, being convinced to do many crimes and attempt to murder Batman at one point,
right?
And someone else, but and then I guess they don't. Their heart's not in the murder, because they do capture the person they believe to be the Dark Regent rather than kill him, and that actually angers Simon Harper at one point. But yeah, like I said, I think there's some really funny moments in this, and I'll talk about them a little bit more in voice acting probably. But overall, just not a strong episode, narratively speaking, from what we've talked about, other than the jokes and the overt sci-fi homages, which are fun. So I settled on a 4 out of 10 for my plot score.
Yeah, I went a tick lower. I went a 3 out of 10. I did not like it at all. And there wasn't a whole lot of Batman either. And in the past, that hasn't been a bad thing necessarily, because you get a lot of storytelling, but you introduce a character that is never seen again in Corey. None of this has any effect on how the rest of the show goes, although there is a mention apparently of this in both Zeta and a later episode of Batman. The video game itself is referenced, but it's really, it's just very silly. And I didn't find the comedy, like, we've had episodes that are comedy. One of our favorite, some of our favorite episodes from Batman Beyond that we've reviewed over the last year or so, including Terry's Friend Dates a Robot and Egg Baby, are generally pretty comedic storytelling. There's a lot of humor in both of those, but they're also well written and enjoyable stories. This, I don't feel, was super well written, and it doesn't feel like Batman for the majority of it. So I think a little bit more of Batman. Also, Batman not getting his butt handed to him by 3 video game nerds, I think also probably could have been some other way to have them escape that initial interaction than Batman sort of getting his tuchus handed to him. So 3 out of 10 for me, 4 out of 10 for you. All right, Liam, well, let's move on to visuals. So visuals and animation that we'll talk about. I believe you said Coco and Dong Yang were responsible for this week's animation. What did you, as you mentioned, so many Easter eggs and nods to classic sci-fi. Not only just Star Wars, though. I saw at least one nod to Lost in Space, and I'm sure there's lots of others in there. This maybe a Star Trek or 2 nod as well, but overtly a lot of Star Wars homages within the visuals there. What did you like when it came to the visuals for this week?
Yeah, I think that is the most fun. I think the background artists on this week's episode definitely went to town and really designed some intricate stuff. I think all the props you sort of see in Harper's Mansion and everything, I think are fun. There's nothing. I was waiting for like the more overt, like obvious Star Wars parody stuff, and some of that comes in the form of dialogue. In fact, of all people, Jar Jar Binks gets a name check from Terry at one point, which maybe that's why they didn't. Maybe there was some internal logic of like, if we're gonna make this joke that implies Star Wars is real, we can't have this thing that's clearly just a knockoff of Star Wars. Like, because I think my thought at first was, okay, this is in the DCAU. Centuries of the Last Cosmos is their Star Wars, but apparently Star Wars also exists,
right? Yeah,
based on that. So yeah, we don't get like a ton of like super overt stuff, but you do have definitely some fun Easter eggs, including probably maybe the most overt one might be when Corey first arrives at Century Croft, the mansion of Harper. A video camera, asks him to state his business, and it's in this deep booming voice, and then it's on this long sort of controlled like crane arm, and it shoots out, and it's right out of one of the first scenes in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, that along with the gate that opens up sort of resembles a gate that is featured in Return of the Jedi as well. I think that clearly the ending with Harper with the hood on and the electricity shooting out of his hand, as I mentioned, is probably the most overt homage to Emperor Palpatine, and also in Return of the Jedi. But as I mentioned, there's an appearance of a robot at Eldon Michaels' apartment when Batman first arrives, and that robot appears to be an homage to the 1960s show, which was then also rebooted as a movie in the late 90s, and then also rebooted as a Netflix show not too long ago, Lost in Space. So the robot there sort of resembles, and then the dialogue, the famous line, "Danger, danger, danger, Will Robinson," was the line from the show. This robot doesn't quite get to the Will Robinson part, but definitely screams danger multiple times. But I will say that I think in that first scene, I think the first scene was the most interesting for me, with Terry and Max and Corey all inside the video game. I thought the color palette actually resembled a very Justice League Unlimited style almost. You had like a yellow, purplish, kind of a brighter hue, a lot of brighter hues that you don't generally see in Batman Beyond. Obviously, we know that the darker, grittier Neo-Gotham tends to be the focus, and nighttime, lots of battles and stuff like that. And when things do stand out, they may be neon in color, but usually don't get a lot of oranges and fuchsias and all of that. So I thought the color palette in the video game scene was actually really great. That's why I was hoping for maybe the reveal that the helmets themselves were revealing a similar sort of landscape, but no such thing. But other than that, I think that obviously the Dark Regent's reveal to be this sort of heavy set bearded fella. Now there's a lot of conjecture, Liam. We talked about this before we started going on the air here, but there's a lot of conjecture across the internet about who Eldon Michaels is supposed to resemble. I thought, and my head went right to a longtime comedian, Bruce Vilanch, who is just Google Bruce Vilanch. You may not know him by name, or you may only know him by name and not know what he looks like, but he's been around for quite a long time. He's a comedian, a writer. I think I remember him specifically from being on Hollywood Squares a lot in the 90s. But so Bruce Vilanch, I think, is the spot on look for this. And I had no idea. I was like, well, why would they model this guy after Bruce Vilanch of all people? Like, that makes no sense. Bruce Vilanch doesn't have anything to do with Star Wars, until I realized, thanks to Bruce Vilanch's Wikipedia, that Bruce actually does have a connection to Star Wars. He was actually credited as one of the writers on the quite infamous, and I apologize for anybody out there who's not a Star Wars fan, this is going to mean absolutely nothing to you, but the 1978 televised one time only and then attempted to be erased from the memories of everyone, CBS Star Wars holiday special, that featured a lot of things. It was basically just a cash grab and a intellectual property licensing gimmick that CBS did that year. It was basically a variety show turned into using the Star Wars intellectual property. Obviously, Star Wars fans, if you're somewhat of a Star Wars fan or you're a nerd, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But Bruce Vilanch was responsible for writing part of that fever dream that turned into an actual television special. So I don't know if that's why they went with him as the model. Like I said, there's a lot of conjecture that says that maybe he's a hybrid of a couple different characters, including George Lucas. Also, the gentleman responsible for creating Dungeons and Dragons was mentioned. I think there was another movie critic or something that was sort of referenced also as potentially being visually based on. But to me, I'm going with Bruce Vilanch because he just looks like Bruce Vilanch to me. So that's very interesting and led me down the rabbit hole of discovering that Bruce is responsible for one of the worst things ever, or partially responsible for writing one of the worst things ever on television. So yeah.
Well, if nothing else, if we've gained nothing else, we know quite a bit more about who to blame for the Star Wars holiday special, and that's good to know, because they deserve to be punished for what they did. But anyway, we have, as you mentioned, a lot of overt Star Wars and other sci-fi homages in the visuals, including, of course, probably most obviously, as you mentioned, that final scene in the throne room, very reminiscent of Return of the Jedi, complete with the bad guy in a dark hood and shooting lightning out of his hands. Of course, as you said, we find out as at the end, the suits the robes and the hood are kind of burned off of him, and we see it's this sort of very teched out super suit that he's wearing. But he sort of has that look of course, of the Emperor from Star Wars. So like I said, I like some of those more overt sci-fi references. There's definitely some Star Trek and as you mentioned, some other great sci-fi properties referenced in there. I think in the background of Eldon Michael's house, there's also what appears to be like a Godzilla statue and some other, it looks like some other stuff on the bookshelves and stuff. I wasn't quite able to make out if there was anything specific, but like I said, I definitely think the one of the MVPs of this episode is definitely the background artists. But yeah, overall, the action itself, it's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with it. There's, like I said, there's, other than if you have a little bit of if you don't enjoy seeing Batman get beat up, this is probably not the episode for you, because he does get beat up a lot in this episode. I like the comedic bit of when Eldon Michaels first shows up, and he's this seemingly dark figure with these green glowing eyes, and he fires a gun at Batman, and then as soon as Batman throws the batarang to disarm him, you hear him say "ow," and then the lights get flipped on, and he's just this this chubby little nerd. I think there's definitely some fun visual comedy as well. But yeah, I kind of went back and forth on this because I do love all those homages. I don't think the action itself is particularly spectacular, but I ended up settling on a 7 out of 10 for my visuals and animation.
Yeah, I went just a tick lower. I went 6 out of 10. I will say that the little bit of continuity that didn't make a lot of sense, as I mentioned as we were discussing the plot, is when Batman is presented with the evidence that Eldon has that shows that he is the rightful creator of Sentries: The Last Cosmos. As he presents it to him, the Sentries arrive, and we see that through an exploding something or other, that this evidence begins to catch on fire, which kind of leads to a tension point. It's like, oh my goodness, well, how is he going to prove now that he is the sole creator? But then as the Sentries fly off with Eldon, we see that Batman picks up the envelope containing the information, and it is no longer on fire. It doesn't show any worse for wear. So I don't know what happened there, if there was originally going to be a plot point that led to Batman having to discover more, and it just was overlooked in the perhaps in the storyboarding aspect, or if it was some liberties that were taken by the animation team, or what happened there. But it leads to a very confusing next moment when Batman picks up a perfectly fine copy that has not been damaged. So for those reasons, I deducted just a single point for that. But yeah, 6 out of 10 and 7 out of 10 for both of us.
There we go.
All right, Liam, moving on to our next category, which is going to be music. Music, as you mentioned, by the amazing Christopher Carter, I believe, for this week's episode. And man, I gotta say, so last week we mentioned that the music was more traditionally orchestral, and that put things sort of out of balance. I had a lot to say. You can check out that in the archives at DCAUreview.com. This week, once again, the music is definitely more orchestral. To me, I think that there was a case to be made for it to be more orchestral based on the fact that these characters were in this video game world, or were living in this video game world, plus the very overt homages to Star Wars. I think the musical pieces that stuck out to me, there's initially when Simon Harper is revealing to the group that he's recruited, the mainframe, which is this room that appears, to be sort of like a dome looking out into space. The music is very, very reminiscent of the very famous Star Wars musical piece, Binary Sunset.
All the last Cosmos games are connected to this computer. From here, I keep track of many things, including the players' scores.
Shui.
You three represent the cream of the crop, the highest scorers in all Gotham.
Ultra Shui!
You are here because each one of you has shown extraordinary aptitude.
To us, Last Cosmos is more than a game.
Yeah, it's our whole life.
Your devotion reflects a profound commitment to the ideals of the Sentries. But are you ready to take the next step? To become real Sentries of the Last Cosmos.
Yes.
Which is, if you know anything about Star Wars, you likely know the song. You can plug that into YouTube if you want to pull it up. But it's one of like the three main themes that is frequently played over and over again. Just amazing piece by John Williams. Just an incredible, legendary piece that he put together there and orchestrated. But that one stood out to me. And then for the rest of the episode, it seems to me that the sort of main theme for the Sentries is a takeoff of the piece that he did for Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, called The Asteroid Field, which is another, it's not quite as big as the main Star Wars theme or maybe Binary Suns, but it's a piece that if you're a Star Wars fan, it's easily recognizable. It takes place in this main scene of Empire Strikes Back, where they're flying through an asteroid field and being chased in the Millennium Falcon. So it's a piece that if you know the points to it, you can match up kind of what the inspiration was drawn off of. I loved the fact that he gave these sort of direct homages to these pieces. There was a couple of notes, of course, that were changed up. He couldn't use the pieces beat for beat or note for note, but he put enough of a spin on it to make it unique, but also enough of the homages in there for fans to kind of pull out.
Yeah, I think that's it. From the first moment when they're in the game, there's definitely elements of the what feels like the kind of the main title of Star Wars, like maybe the version you would hear over the credits of a Star Wars movie, a bit more fast paced to it. But yeah, there's almost start to finish. There's a lot of musical Easter eggs and homages to Star Wars and I'm sure other sort of classic sci-fi and yeah, and like you said, and that is a point I thought that is absolutely favor. compared to last week's kind of awkward or interesting choices made in the music last week, is that this episode is all about paying homage to, classic sci-fi, Star Wars predominantly, but also, as you said, Star Trek and Lost in Space and other things like that. So it totally makes sense to have a very classic orchestral, 80s, 70s, 80s, sci-fi opera soundtrack to it, because that's what this is representing. So I thought the music was pretty great, start to finish, and I ended up settling on a pretty strong 9 out of 10 for my music score.
Yeah, we're on the same wavelength with that one. I also went with a 9 out of 10. It's really good. I think the only thing that I would have loved to have heard was maybe a more orchestral version of the Batman Beyond theme. Something that would have kind of married our traditional rock heavy synthesizer, guitar heavy, drum heavy Batman theme with a more orchestral classic theme there that sort of married the theme for the entire episode. But it's really strong, and it really stands out, and I think pulls up a lot of the action or lack thereof, I think, sometimes in some of the scenes. So plus, like I said, as a Star Wars fan myself, I appreciated the direct homages and the nods to those just fantastic pieces by the amazing composer John Williams. So also has his own connections to DC, of course, with the traditional Superman theme being his piece as well. All right, Liam, let's move on to our final category of the day, and that is going to be voice acting. Not a large cast this week, but certainly, in addition to our normal cast, a recognizable voice or two. Let's talk about this week's voice cast.
That is right. We have some big names there. One very big name in particular that I'll save for a little bit here. But yes, we have playing our as we mentioned, these high school kids who get roped into this nefarious plot. We have Chris Demetral as Corey. We have Alex Thomas Jr. as Burford, and not only does he get to, of course, play the high school bully and jock Nelson Nash briefly, but really, and I hate to say this because it sounds like an insult, but the roles that Seth Green was born to play is exactly who he plays in this in this episode. The pedantic nerd arguing with other nerds to try to prove who is the most nerdy. And he does a pretty good job here, and it's fun getting to hear him because that's always sort of the comedy of him playing this. He's this small and by all accounts very nice and very sweet guy, and then he's playing this big, kind of cocky jock and in Nelson. So getting him to kind of play maybe a more archetypal Seth Green role in this episode, I thought was a lot of fun, even if it's only kind of a little bit.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. This is the guy that plays Chris on Family Guy and is responsible for Robot Chicken, and, clearly has a love for the nerdy side of things. So for him to get to play a role that's a little bit more overtly, less of a jock and more overtly nerdy. It's a role that he clearly reveled in. And I think even though it was a small part to play, that he did a fantastic job. He's a great voice actor, clearly.
Absolutely. And then as I mentioned, Chris Demetral is playing Corey, who is the main character of the episode, because he's the friend of Max and Terry's, who gets sort of sucked into this world. But I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with his performance, but I don't love it either, just because I feel like there's just not a lot of meat on the bone. Like, I really like the other two, obviously Seth Green, and again, maybe it's not fair to compare him to such a prolific voice actor in Seth Green, but I thought Alex Thomas Jr. as Burford, kind of the other kind of really over the top nerd, is a lot of fun. And just by comparison, I think Chris Demetral's Corey he's a lot more understated, I feel like.
Yeah, it's weird. I didn't quite get the whole, like, this guy's whole life is this video game from the way that he portrayed the character, I guess. Like, I don't know. I guess in your mind, you have a stereotypical nerd that's obsessed with a particular intellectual property. and what that sounds like. Not that it has to be like comic book guy from The Simpsons, overtly over the top nerd, but right. Something a little bit more enthusiastic. The enthusiasm, I think, for Sentries is lost, especially in comparison to the other two performances from our other two supposedly obsessed characters. I think especially in that initial scene where he's introduced at the mansion of Simon Harper, where they're all sort of nerding out about the different full-size live action props from their favorite video games. I get that he's supposed to be a little bit overwhelmed and sort of not quite incredulous, but caught off guard by the amount of realness to the things that are in front of him. But at the same time, it does just come across almost like he's disinterested in it. So I feel like it could have been a bit different of a portrayal. It may have come across as more effective without going into the extreme nerd side of things.
Absolutely. Elsewhere on our voice cast, we do, of course, briefly have Cree Summer as Max. Playing our main villain of the piece, we have Tristan Rogers as Simon Harper, who's probably best known for work on he was on General Hospital for several years. I think he does a solid job. I don't think he's like a great villain. I was kind of waiting for him to really play. Once he was doing the Emperor, I wanted to kind of see him go like full crazy maniacal Ian McDermott. But we don't really get to that. He's a little bit more, I guess more of like he's a little bit more Shakespearean of a villain. It's very these sort of these powerful monologues of everything. And as you kind of begin to wonder, does he even realize that this is a scam anymore? Like he seems to really start to buy into his own hype by the end of the episode.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's just based on the property that it's giving an homage to. You expect that more over the top, that as you mentioned, the maniacal performance of the Emperor, of Ian McDermott as the Emperor in Star Wars. So his is very understated from beginning to end, and I think that it comes out a little bit when he finally tries to sick the Sentries on Batman at the end, but I feel like it's just a little bit too late. I think that most of the enthusiasm or the emotion that comes out, especially in that final scene, is actually from our last cast member, from our guest stars.
Absolutely. And then speaking of which, we have, of course, the great Patton Oswald as Eldon Michaels. Probably don't need to go into his IMDb page too deeply. Most people who listen to this have probably heard of him, but a lot of TV to his credit, stand up and a fair amount of voice acting as well. So he is the highlight of this episode to me. He's very, and yes, again, he's playing a sort of very stereotypical over the top nerd, but his dialogue, as we mentioned, with going back and forth with Harper, with Tristan Rogers as Harper, as he's being called a blasphemer and the Dark Regent and the agent of evil and all of this stuff, and he's countering being attacked by lightning powers with asking to take just 10% instead of 20. I think that's pretty darn funny to me.
Yeah. I think people mostly know Mr. Oswald from, of course, correctly predicting how Boba Fett would survive the Sarlacc. But no, just kidding. Of course not. Yeah. He's a very dynamic actor. His voice acting, it's no different, I think, than his general acting on, whether you know him from King of Queens or the various other, AP Bio and all the other places that he has popped up over the years. But he clearly has a way of expressing the emotion. I feel like it was a little bit distracting just because of how identifiable his voice is. and matching it up with what the character looked like, being such a unique character model for this character, it sort of didn't quite mesh for me in my brain, at least. I don't think he did a bad performance. I think that final scene, as he's sort of being tortured and begging Harper and sort of negotiating with him for the amount of royalties that he wants to receive, there was a chuckle that I had there, and I thought that was the most effective line that he gave. And then, as I mentioned, the final scene as the kids inexplicably show up to his house to apologize and deliver the script to him and begin asking him questions, him sort of putting the bow on it with the homage to the very first thing you see when you watch a Star Wars movie is I thought that line was delivered very well and felt like I was watching a children's cartoon at that point, like something designed for a younger audience. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. I don't think that anybody this week in any of our guest stars, nor Cree Summer as Max, nor of course Will Friedle as Terry McGinnis / Batman, or Kevin Conroy as Bruce. I don't think that anybody necessarily did anything over the top or put forth much sort of earth shaking performances this week. I think everybody is fine. I think that overall, because of just the overshadowing almost of the storyline itself and all of these nods to science fiction properties, that left me maybe not I don't know, maybe putting the voice acting in the back seat. And then again, I think having Patton Oswald, a recognizable voice, sort of being one of your main protagonists here, ultimately, I think it was a slightly distracting to match up with that character model. So for all of those reasons, I gave voice acting a very middle of the road 5 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just a tick higher. I went 6 out of 10. I did really enjoy Patton Oswald as Eldon Michaels. I just think that was the best the comedic stuff. And I will just say, while I would generally agree that this is not anything to write home about as far as the best episodes for Kevin Conroy or Cree Summer or Will Friedle, it does have maybe my favorite line in the history of Batman Beyond in it. When Batman arrives at the Hall of Records to find where the Sentries have already broken in, he looks down and goes, big smoking hole, could be a clue. I laughed for like 5 minutes at that. I had to pause it. I was laughing so hard. Like I thought the delivery of Will Friedle on that line is the funniest darn thing that I have heard in a long time. So props to him for that. And
you know what that reminded me of too? That reminds me of like video game dialogue. Like you would hear that in one of the Batman Arkham games or something. But and I get it. They kind of have to. It's supposed to trigger you to recognize you're on the right track or whatever. But it just sounds something like a video game character. And for this episode to be based on all this video game intellectual property stuff, I was like, man, if that isn't right on the nose for video game dialogue, whether it was intentional or not, I don't know, or whether it was just supposed to be a funny throwaway line, whatever. For whatever reason, though, I was like, man, if that isn't perfect mirrored video game dialogue there, I thought that. I also enjoyed his another homage to Star Wars, I believe, in the opening scene where Terry's being pursued in the very first scene by this spaceship. He goes, "I can't shake him," which is a line also that's very prominent during the very first Star Wars movie. So very interesting there. But that line definitely, I laughed at that as well.
Absolutely. So I don't think anyone's great, but there are a couple of lines, like I said, Patton Oswalt's lines, and then that one line from Will Friedle's Batman, definitely enough to make this memorable to me.
Absolutely. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up now with our final scores for the day. I end up with a higher than last week. That's the good news, but still not very high at all. 23 out of 40 for this week. What about you?
Yeah, and I'm a couple points higher once again this week as I was last week. I am at a 26 out of 40.
All right. Well, rewatchability. I already mentioned that this video game does get a mention later on in not only this, but apparently in a Zeta Project episode as well. Is that enough for you to say that this is a must watch, Liam?
I wouldn't say this goes on must watch. I think that would be like saying you have to watch like the Flash episode where he does the energy bar commercial because later in the Justice League Unlimited episode he bumps into the cardboard cutout and Orion punches it.
Right.
Like, I wouldn't necessarily say that's a strong enough that is likely background stuff, but like I said, I think this episode is fun, especially if you do have a lot of love for Star Wars and other things. I can argue that this is a maybe like a half a thumb up.
Oh my goodness.
the Orange Cassidy thumbs up, as I like to say here.
Right.
That's right. But yeah, I can't say this is particularly integral to Batman Beyond, nor is it integral to the DCAU as a whole, despite there being a couple of other mentions of it throughout this series and another one. But yeah, I can't give this a strong thumbs up, but I do think there is a little bit of meat on the bone if you are a big fan of Star Wars and Star Trek and some of these other sci-fi properties.
I'm going to cut right to the chase. It's skip for me. And I think that there are plenty of other franchises that have done better homages to Star Wars. So I will say skip this one. It's cute, it's nice, but we're not left with a long-standing ramifications from any of this. These characters never appear again. Corey never makes another appearance. The only characters that appear again are Bruce, Max, and Terry. So those and their lives are not really affected by this in any sort of way. So I'm happy to say you can just go ahead and put this one on the skip if you're not interested. If you want to see a few of the homages or maybe listen to the great soundtrack that we mentioned, maybe pull up the clips on YouTube or hey, fire it up on the fantastic HBO Max app if you have that at your ready and you want to watch a couple of scenes from it. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for checking us out. Don't forget, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app. That's a way to support us. We would love for you to do that. And if your podcast app allows you to leave a review, you can do so for us. That would be great. A 5-star review would be amazing, and a little blurb about what it is that you like would be appreciated. You can also, if you want to support us another way, you can check out our store at DCAUreview.com and then click on the store tab. You can check out lots of merch there to support the podcast. You can also check out the link at the bottom of the pod on whatever it is that you listen to our podcast app if you want to support us that way. If you're looking to do another free way to support us, you can subscribe to us on the Pod Tower YouTube channel. That's where you get your weekly DCAU review episodes dropped in sort of in your YouTube video form there. And also, of course, you get content from our friends at Watchtower Database and Tim Talk. Liam, we are actually pivoting. Is it next week we're pivoting?
Mm-hmm.
We are actually pivoting. You'll notice that I tried to set the groundwork here at the beginning of the episode. I didn't say, hey, we're in a month of Batman Beyond episodes. I said, we are in a month discussing the future. And you know what that means, Liam. Batman Beyond isn't the only futuristic television series to take place in the DCAU. That's right. The long-awaited, at last, we are going to be tackling the very first episode of the Zeta Project. Liam, it's we actually just passed the anniversary for this show debuting. And I know you're excited. This has been one that you've been chomping at the bit. I've had to tell you, no, Liam, we can't review the Zeta Project this week for the last 192 episodes. But fear not, our 193rd edition, we've put it off long enough. We are going to be reviewing the very first episode of the Zeta Project.
I'm gonna ignore that absolute slanderous comments you just made about the assassination of my character. You just perpetrated on this show by claiming that I like the Zeta Project. But we had to get to it eventually. We were waiting. It was a convenient excuse that we review all of the Batman shows in order. So because we had to wait quite a while to get to the Zeta episode of Batman Beyond, it meant that we could wait quite a while to review the Zeta project. But hey, there's a finite number of all of the regular shows that we have been reviewing for the last few years left, especially Batman Beyond. So I think, going forward, we'll be pairing Batman Beyond months. Like you said, it won't be a Batman Beyond month anymore. It'll be a future month, and we will probably be trading off in Batman Beyond, and as you mentioned, next week, kicking it off, the first episode of the Zeta Project entitled The Accomplice. So come right back next week and hear us break down a cartoon that I don't think either of us have ever seen. So, let's go.
Let's do this, shall we? All right, very exciting. Yes, excited to tackle that with you next week, Liam. But until then, I'm Cal.
I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next exciting episode of the DCAU Reveal.
Bye-bye.